So welcome to It Came to Japan, not from Japan. And this is a panel about the Japanese game industry and working in the crazy land of Japan. My name is John Davis. I am a community manager at Q Games well, that's my role right now, I guess. And I've got a fine panel of luminaries here that have all been in the Japanese games industry for quite some time. We want to keep this panel like this is kind of small and intimate, so we want to encourage you guys to ask questions and pick our brains about the industry. And if you're interested in games and or working in Japan, this is a good panel for you. So I'll just go down the line here, and if everyone could give an intro and talk about what you do at your current position, I guess. Maybe we should turn the mic on.
I know. It is on, but it's not working.
Here you go.
Okay. So I'm Dylan Cuthbert, and I run a company called Q Games in Kyoto, Japan. And before then, I worked for Sony Japan. And then way back in the day, I worked sort of with Nintendo, working on some games. Initially, a lot of people say, yeah, you must have loved it, when you arrived in Japan. It's such a good goal to have. But when I first came to Japan, I actually didn't know anything about it. I'd made a demo for the Game Boy, which was like a 3D demo, and actually here in Vegas, they had the summer CES, I think back in those days, and some executive at Nintendo had seen what my boss at the time was showing off. He was saying, "Oh, look, we've got 3D on the Game Boy," and the exec saw it and he said, "Okay, we're flying you over to Japan next week." So my boss came back and he said, "Okay, you're going to Japan next week," and then I was like, "Okay," and I arrived. And I came off the plane, and as I was sort of landing in the airport, it just suddenly occurred to me that I hadn't read up anything about Japan at all, and knew nothing about it. And I thought, is it a communist state? I just had no clue, because at the time, this was like 1989 or 90, somewhere around there. Not so much Japanese culture had really come to the UK, because we didn't really have Nintendo and all those. We were all, Sinclair Spectrum and Commodore Amiga and that kind of thing. And so I arrived here and I went to and had a week in Kyoto, and people like Miyamoto and Yokoi-san and people like those took us out for dinner, every day, and I just didn't know who they were. So it was quite interesting because yeah, exactly. So initially, when I was first introduced to Miyamoto, he said, the Nintendo America guy, he said, "So this is Miyamoto, and he created Mario." And he said it in such a way that I was meant to be impressed. And at that point, I hadn't actually played Mario because so I was just okay, nice to meet you. And then but I fell in love. So in that week, it was amazing. Everybody was so friendly, and everything was so lively, and people had a lot of energy, and it felt like coming from northern London, which is where I lived at the time. Coming from there, it felt like I was moving from a dystopia to a utopia, and it was such a black and white contrast that I decided at that point that I would definitely try and live there. And it took about another year to get back with doing projects, working on this project with Nintendo. But I really, I got back to England, and I really just wouldn't shut up about Japan to everybody, all my family, and so my family soon knew that I would not be long in the UK. But it's an amazing place to work, and I was very lucky, obviously, to kind of be launched into that career, and I've loved it ever since.
I think it actually does work.
It does work? Okay.
Let me have that one.
I like this one though.
I know, I do. I do too. That's why I want that one. All right, so are we doing origin story or what we do? Is this so it's origin story?
Well, Dylan did his origin story.
Okay, so
His
origin.
superhero origin
Let's
story.
do the origin story then. So
What
my
tragic, who was killed in your past?
Right. Who am I getting revenge on? Right. So my name is Brad Douglas. I work in SCEI, which is the headquarters of PlayStation. It's in Tokyo. So my origin story, so I've always, this is like the most typical, I think, because when I was young, I was super hardcore into like anime and manga and stuff like that, and this was back when, you couldn't get this was back when DVDs didn't exist, and so you had to import like VHS tapes from Japan, and they cost like $120 to watch one movie, and it was heartbreaking and wallet breaking for a high school kid.
With terrible subtitles.
Yes, with the worst of all subtitles. But because of that, when I went to college, I studied Japanese. I went as an exchange student, and I had much the same, impression as Dylan. I got there, and after, a week, I was like, I want to live here, like, forever. Like, I don't want to go home. So, but I had to, because I had to graduate. So I went back, I graduated, and I went on the JET program, which is where you go to Japanese high schools and teach English to Japanese kids, which is, it's your mileage may vary, but it's a pretty sweet gig because you don't have to do a lot of work and you get paid pretty well and you're living in Japan. So I did that for 3 years, which is the longest I could do it. And then I kind of had this idea like, oh, I'm kind of stuck. I'm just gonna have to go back to the US because there's nothing for me to do. And I lived there for about 5 years doing translation and interpreting work and sort of realized, oh, you know what? Living in America sucks. But I really like living in Japan. I'm gonna move back to Japan.
We do like America though.
I love America.
It's just the living here that sucks.
Yeah. Visiting here is amazing.
We're gonna feel everyone's gonna look at us like kind of pretentious, like who are these like snobs up here? They're like talking down us.
Yeah, it's only because they've never been to Japan. That's why they don't know.
Exactly.
Who has been to Japan? Is anyone?
Okay, good. So you guys get it. You know what we're talking about. So I quit my job, sold all my worldly possessions, moved to Japan, found a job doing interpreting work for a life insurance company, which was mind-numbing, but they paid really well, and my coworkers were pretty cool. But weirdly enough, like the week before I moved to Japan, one of my good friends from high school, who actually worked at SCEI in San Mateo, he was moving to Japan to do development work on PS3 right before it launched. So he was one of my friends. He did some stuff in the network code. So don't blame him for the problems with PS3 network. So he, had like a company-sponsored apartment and everything, and so I, was able to stay with him. I had a place to stay. It was really nice. And through him, I met a bunch of people that worked at SCEJ and at Japan Studio. So I met like the producer of Talkman, which was this PSP game that allowed you to like translate using the mic and everything like that. Yeah, Yoshi. And so he was like my guy when I had, issues with my job. I would go to him, we'd go out drinking, and I'd complain about how much I hated work. And then one day he's like, Brad, but you like games so much, why don't you come work for us? And I was like, oh my God, that's an amazing idea. Why don't I do that? So I went and looked at the homepage and just looking at the jobs that they had, the career section, and there was like 2. I was like, I can do this. And I applied, and 4 interviews, and 3 months later, they hired me, which, was like, I can't believe this is happening. This is incredible. And that was 5 years ago. So, yep, it's been great. I love it. That's my origin story.
It sounds like you're having a long weekend, Brad. Your voice is
Yeah, it's I have not been to bed before 2:30 a.m. any night so far. So
PSX.
So it looks like I'm up next. Hi, my name is Tsubasa. Um, Japanese, of course. I'm not your typical Japanese, obviously, you can see that. Grew up in New York, moved back to Japan when I was about 13. Started my career at SCEI. This is where Brad is now. This is back in '97. Company was about 200 to 300 employees deep, very young. It was probably shortly after Dylan was.
What year was it?
'97.
Yeah, so I joined SCEI in '98.
Okay.
But I was at Sony America from '96 as well.
Right.
So yeah.
So company was very small. You knew everybody. You know, you could actually pick up the phone or even just go visit somebody and go talk to them. Anyway, so '97 I started. SCEI, it was kind of like corporate planning. More about number crunching, budgets for fiscal, a little bit of supply chain. It was a wonderful job. It was funny because I was offered the job in the summer of '96. And my friends at school are like, "You're going to go work for who?" I said, "Sony Computer Entertainment." "What do they do? Bio?" "No, they have this PlayStation thing." They're like, yeah, PlayStation. Good luck. January '97, Final Fantasy VII. Bang! All of a sudden, these guys are my best friends. I'm like, "You suckers." It's like, what the hell? Anyway, so I did that corporate planning for about 3 to 4 years. The company is still small, growing rapidly, but still very small. I looked around, see what else, what we're doing in the business. I'm like, hey, all right, I did a lot of number crunching. This is very interesting. I got to know a lot of people. I have no idea what we do on the software side of this company. So I reach out to then the top of PD, Akira Sato, literally an email, and then shortly after I visited his office, he's like, "Yeah, do it. Tell HR that you talked to me, and we'll make it happen." I'm like, "Damn, that simple?"
Talking of Akira Sato, so when I was in 2001, and I decided
2001, by the way.
There you go. So maybe it's just in that mood, because when I decided to quit Sony and start Q Games, I went to him and said, "I'm going to quit Sony and I'm going to start Q Games. Can you help me fund the first project?" And he said, "Yeah, do it."
Yeah, it was basically that attitude that we had at Sony PlayStation. It's like, if there was an opportunity, if it was the right fit, the right person, or whatever, if it made business sense, the attitude was, do it. If we were so understaffed, it didn't matter. If you had the will to do it, they gave you the power to do it, and that was the beauty of it. So I moved to PD. It was still kind of a business kind of support role. Eventually, I got pulled over by Polyphony. Kazunori himself said, "Hey, you come work for me." I happen to like cars. I'm like, in a heartbeat, I'm like, "Hell yeah, I'll go." I went to work for
What's like what is it? Sony Studios Japan, which is
Studios Japan.
Which is the latest name for that group.
Right. Right.
Speaking of that studio, we have someone on the panel that works there.
That's a nice segue.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Noriko from Sony Computer Entertainment Japan Studio. Yes, I am. I'm ex-dev associate producer, so I want to talk a little bit about my background. I actually grew up in China and Hong Kong, and China in 1980s and 1990 was so different from what it is now. And I was living there. I was the only foreigner in the region. And when I went back to Japan in 1990s for a short time, although I was still living in China, it was like a flood of colors. For me, it was like a renaissance suddenly came to my life. And I saw animes on the TV for the first time, and I also witnessed the 3D game burst of the 3D games as well, and that's when I decided I want to join this industry. And I went to a college in England, and after that I got a job at the Japan studio, so my dream came true. And it's been 4-5 crazy years since then. The previous title I've worked on is Rain for PlayStation 3. Thank you very much. I love that title. And also Soul Sacrifice Delta for PlayStation Vita. Yes. Thank you for playing.
Yeah, she's the most popular person on this panel now.
And currently, I'm working actually with Dylan and John. I'm assisting the Tomorrow Children team from Sony's side. Thank you.
Pandering.
And today, I'm the only female among those panelists, so I'm hoping I can give you a slightly different perspective as well.
For the women.
Yeah, more women in the industry, right?
Yeah, well, this is not the diversity panel, but actually, that's something we can talk about. And just to give you a brief rundown, I have a kind of a strange story the way I got to Japan. Like Brad, I came over teaching English, and I taught English at a man-to-man conversation school, which is probably the easiest way for anyone to get to Japan if you have a degree. And it's kind of make a job in a little way. Like it's really cookie cutter. You don't have to have an education degree, and you just sit in front of a crowd, like 3 or 4 people, and really talk at them for 45 minutes, and hope that they absorb some of the language. Massimo, you want to come up to the stage? So anyway, I worked there, and I was freelancing for a few websites like IGN, and I was also doing some freelancing for Famitsu with the help of my wife, because my Japanese was terrible back then. It's still not very good now, but and through those freelance gigs, I ended up meeting Suda51 and interviewing him a couple of times. He's the creator of the Grasshopper games, like No More Heroes and Killer 7. Huh? Flower, Sun, and Rain, FSR. Yeah, I have a great FSR T-shirt. Every time I wear it, people want to jack me for it, but. So through those interviews, my wife got a job at Grasshopper as an interpreter, and I went to her and I said, those guys don't have any kind of social media presence. Are they looking for a community manager? And I went in and I gave a pitch to the company, and it was so funny because I gave this whole long pitch and I showed them, everything they could do and everything they were missing out on, and then at the end of it, they were like, so what do you want to do? I was like, I want to work here. And about 6 months later, they hired me. And so that it kind of worked out really well, just having the connections there and having the drive to chase it down. We also have on the panel another GHM alum, Massimo,
Hello.
you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Massimo, and I worked at Grasshopper Manufacturer before. Yeah, actually, I'm Italian, and I run an Italian development studio called Ovosonico right now. We're the creators of Murasaki Baby. But before that, thank you. Before that, I worked in Canada for about 4 years for Ubisoft Montreal, and then I decided to, go and pursue my dream to work and live in Japan, and that's what I did. So I landed a job as a producer for a small Japanese publisher, and that was probably the most challenging time of my entire life when I moved to Tokyo the first time. And then I got the chance to meet Suda51 and the gang at Grasshopper, and I joined in to direct Shadows of the Dam. That was like an awesome experience, I have to say. And that's also the reason why my hair are gray right now. Not just because I'm old. But yeah, overall it's been incredibly intense, I would say. Everything changed since my transition from Canada, North America in general, to Japan. And I had the luck to experience a little bit three different ways of making games. One is the European way, the other one is the North American one, and the Japanese one. And in a way, having had the chance to actually set up my own studio has been for me a sort of, I would say, a way to actually gather the best from each culture and try to, mix things up a little bit. And you can tell also from the title of the game, which has a Japanese word in it. Yeah.
Murasaki means,
it means purple in Japanese.
Means purple in Japanese. I love purple, by the way.
Yeah. Suda-san hated it, actually.
Yeah.
You remember I tried to make the dark volumes in the game in purple, and Suda-san hated that color.
Yeah, that's why he hated me eventually. Too much purple.
Too much purple, yeah.
But that's you bring up a good point, Massimo. There's subtle differences, or some subtle and some big differences between the way that studios run in America and Europe and Japan. And I just wanted to open up to the panel, like you guys, everyone here actually works in kind of slightly different roles. Massimo and Dylan are both directors and founders, creative money makers. I do community management, and I also do a lot of things with PR and with marketing. Pretty much anything that they ask me to do. Brad, I don't know what you do.
Not many do.
He's like, have you guys ever seen Martin from like the 90s? And then he has his friend Tommy, and everybody's like, what do you do, Tommy? And he's like, you know what I do. No, you never find out. No, but Brad's important. But I think he could probably explain it a little bit better than I will.
One of the parts of working for any platform holder like us or Microsoft or Nintendo or whoever, there's a group that's called third-party relations. And so what we do is we talk to the publishers and the developers, and we find out what games they're working on, what's in their pipeline coming up the next year or 2 years coming down the line. And then we start talking to them about things that they can do to make the game more interesting or more better for PlayStation users. So sometimes it can be a little bit controversial, when some particular title ends up being a complete exclusive on a particular platform. Other users on other platforms may get a little bit out of shape about it. But that's the kind of things that we do. My job.
And you had a big announcement related to that this weekend.
We did. Street Fighter V, completely exclusive on PlayStation 4 forever. Forever. That was. And PC.
And PC.
And cross-platform play with PC for the first time.
Woo, Steam.
So I work in SCEI in global third-party relations. So most of the RHQs, America, Europe, and Japan, have their own third-party relations groups that deal with the publishers in their area. So America has like EA and Take-Two and those guys, and Europe has Ubisoft and everything. And so I oversee all of that. So I look at what pub titles are coming from every publisher worldwide, every developer, and I try to find the sort of best way that all of that slots in to our schedule, and what makes sense for how we're moving forward in terms of like, you know, are we looking to try to get a lot of core gamers? Are we trying to get more families or more kids involved, and then try to make sure that we're sort of aiming in the right direction with that kind of stuff. And then we're also like the interface with the publishers. So before PS4 was launched, we had to go talk to them and say, hey, here's our new thing. Can you please make some games for it? And then, you know, they were like, maybe, I guess. And so then E3 happened, and then they're like, yes, we'd love to make some games for you. So that's kind of what I do. It's a pretty cool job.
Yeah, I love it. Let's trade.
No.
Tsubasa, you want to like talk a little bit about what you're
Sure.
into?
So my role at Sony Computer Entertainment America, as of today, is basically I work with Noriko, actually, as she's one of my counterparts. I work with Japan Studios with the sole kind of purpose of trying to bring as many of their titles to the US market as possible. And I think we kind of hinted earlier, our regional headquarters basically looked at our first-party software portfolio. It's not an automatic release. Basically, they look at their portfolio and say, okay, will this fit or not? Will this particular project resonate in this market or not? So I see my role as part of it is to pitch that to our sales and marketing teams, number one. Unless they decide to publish this game in the US, that game is done. Like, well, I mean, we'll have to find other ways to work around it, of course. Which is funny because when I used to live in Tokyo back in 2001, if the first party deal didn't go through, we would then work with third parties to release, I don't know, maybe, for example, I'm trying to think of an example. Gosh, there are many, I'm sorry. But first party, maybe could have.
I seem to remember Ape Escape doing that.
Yeah, Demon Souls. That's a good
There
example.
you go. That's a good example.
Miyazaki-san left. I'm sorry, but no, it's just how it works. And you know, fortunate or not, that was just the business model. Anyway, so back to where I am now. Once we do get a commitment to release, then we get into the production work. We help the teams localize. That part is like, at one point, you need to kind of learn how to do that in your sleep. That's the easy part. Getting it through QA, relatively easier part. Next comes the release phase. Again, you're working very closely with sales, marketing, PR, eventually becoming the spokesman of that title in that region. Again, like it or not, we end up doing a lot of interviews, on the behalf of the teams, because they can't fly out for every single opportunity. So obviously, we had to earn our trust with each of the teams, again, to speak on their behalf. Can't say anything that's out of line, incorrect, whatever that may be. So we wear a lot of hats. In a nutshell, we represent Japan Studios, but it requires a lot of skill sets, and it's a lot of fun, lots of fun.
I think there's a path to Japan through Sony America, that kind of SCEI. So if people wanted to eventually get to Japan, should they first apply for a job at SCEI if they're already in America?
That's a good question. I'm not so sure. I suppose so. That's one way of probably getting your foot in the door, working for SCEI and then help, Japan being your counterpart. I think, in general, Sony as a company, if you can prove yourself, and again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. If you can prove yourself, and if there's an opportunity, and if you're the right fit, chances will open up and doors will open up, and it's a matter of whether you're willing to take that plunge or not. So that's how I see it.
Yeah, I took that path obviously because I
Right.
joined SCEI. I worked on a game called Blasto on the PlayStation 1. Very old game. Probably no one remembers it really. Oh, someone did. But basically, at the end of that project, I decided that I really wanted to go and live back in Japan. You know, I really enjoyed America when I was here, but I just felt that if I was going to live somewhere forever, then it was going to be Japan. And so I just basically went to my boss at the time and said, like, you know, contact, you know, Sony Japan and tell them I want a job with them. And then eventually, it took a little while, but then eventually I did an interview with like Yoshida, you know, Shu, and he said, okay, yeah, come on then, come over. And then that got me transferred over. So I think, yeah, if you have where there's a will, there's a way, I think. Yeah.
I think so. I wanted to say just there's a lot of different diversity here on the panel for, you know, different ways that you can not only work in games here but also in Japan. But just to get back to like some of the differences, what do you guys think are the major differences between dev in the States? Or I guess Dylan and Massimo probably have the most experience with that, with the different regions. What do you guys think?
Well, contrary to stereotypes, the hardest I ever worked on in the industry is when I was at Sony America, actually. So I think the higher fire laws are quite tight here, right? So it's like, you know, it's like 2 weeks' notice or whatever, and I think that creates a little bit of a bad work ethic, a little bit. A lot of people say, you know, in Japan they work really hard, you know, and it's all overtime and all that kind of thing. But to be honest, it really was like America was the one that was really hard work. I enjoyed it because that's, you know, I love making games. But you know, I thought that was an interesting contrast to the stereotype, because the stereotype is that in Japan you work, you know, really hard. But I think in Japan it's kind of very much a work hard, play hard kind of ethic. So if you like to work hard and you like to play hard, then it's perfect, I think.
Yeah, to me, probably the most notable difference was the approach to the creative process, I would say. Especially coming from, you know, a huge team at Ubisoft Montreal, that I noticed that even at the creative direction level, in North America, we tend sometimes to, you know, have this sort of like brainstormings or, you know, design by consensus approach, which is obviously a safer option, especially for huge scope projects that obviously have higher risks at stake. While in Japan, regardless of the scope, I noticed that the approach is way more authorial towards content. So there's going to be always this kind of game director, you know, reference point. It's going to be probably a tyrannic one, I would say. But
don't look at me when you say that. He's
I'm
like
not.
winking at me like.
I'm not. But I would say in a good way, because it allows the team to, I mean, he's the holder of the vision of the entire project, and it allows the team to actually move forwards towards the same goal, and that's particularly important, especially in huge projects and with lots of team members. So, ironically, I could probably, as a creative guy, express myself more in Japan than back in the huge teams, where, you know, you're just probably a number, because we at a certain point we had like 2 or 3 creative directors, which makes no sense to me, but yeah, that was the deal. So I was very much, that was a huge deal a huge point for me, and it took me probably 2 or 3 years to realize that, but yeah, the creative approach is way different, and that's what I also liked about it, because that, you know, it's like shameless, right? Because you can really come up with any weird idea and give it a try, actually, and have a lighter approach to prototyping, or actually to, you know, to don't be afraid to run any risks in a pre-production phase. That's what I noticed.
Do you guys think that approach has led to, like, I guess Japan is really known for quirky games. I can't see something like Tokyo Jungle ever being made in anywhere but Japan.
Yeah, there are some crazy titles out there, aren't there?
Yeah.
And they're pretty much all created by, as you were saying, like the sort of one tyrannical sort of master. And if you think through all Japanese games in general, you know, like Gran Turismo, for example, as well, you know, Yami-san, you know, it's just this one vision, right? It's just, and it's unwavering. And like, you know, Miyamoto as well. I mean, you know, he's pretty hardcore, strict internally. I mean, everybody else sees his public side, but you know, for the development team, it's, you know, he does have these very strong visions, and he'll just cut through everything to get there. And one interesting thing about the differences, I think, is in some ways the Japanese language, the way you express yourself in the language, also affects the way the game design is designed, I think. Because Japanese is very context-based. So when you're speaking about something, there's a subtle level of things that are unspoken because they're in the context. And it means that you can say certain things very quickly compared to the English language, where you have to kind of wander around a little bit to get to where you're going. And I think that sometimes helps as well, especially in the creative process, because in just one word you can express something. And I think there's a lot of I don't know if anybody's learning Japanese here, but there's a lot of one word sort of expressions that you can use when you're designing games that encompass a very broad, wide
Can you give an example?
like merihari.
Merihari.
So there's a word called merihari, and it kind of means, I kind of imagine it in my head. I mean, how do you even describe it in English? So I kind of, the way I think of it in my head, I think of a roller coaster, and I think of a roller coaster having merihari. And so with a roller coaster, you climb up the first hill, and it's building up your tension, and you're feeling all the emotion and stuff. And then when you get to the top, you get over the top, and then you go flying down, and you kind of get that release of emotion, and then maybe there's another few bumps and stuff. And the designer of the roller coaster has considered merihari to be able to construct that roller coaster, because it's giving you this kind of rhythm and balance and a ride, I suppose, in a way. So, I mean, that's my very strange translation of that word. But I think there are a lot of those words in Japanese, and when you're designing a game, sometimes, you know, you can just use them. They're like tools. You know, you just say, you know, we need to add more merihari, and then everybody understands, you know, what they need to be doing. In English, I don't even know, you know, you'd have to do the whole metaphor, you know, you'd have to, you know. So, and I think, so that is also a really interesting side, you know, the language differences. And I mean, so, you know, I'd like to know about Italian maybe, but so is Italian and English, so they have similar roots, so they're probably slightly similar, but...
I think the language is a very good point, actually. It's totally true. And in fact, when I moved to Japan, I wasn't able to speak Japanese, actually, because I got into a job that wasn't requiring any Japanese fluency. It was not true, because I was the only foreigner in the company. And just as an anecdote, I was in these meetings and I was holding a producer position, right? And I couldn't understand a single word of Japanese. Really, honestly, nothing. I mean, I could order sushi at a restaurant, of course, but because I was studying Japanese by myself before. But come on, a meeting with producers talking about business and stuff, no way. And, you know, just not to appear total idiot, I was just like, you know, nodding like this and go like
Retreat to the nod. Hi. Hi.
But I really couldn't get a single word. And then I tried to, you know, get my colleague to, you know, send me a sort of recap email in Japanese, and I was basically studying at night, trying to translate that email to understand the content. But, you know, yeah, I mean, it's funny because just by nodding and saying nothing, they thought I was a genius, because like, I was a really good producer. But in fact, I would just stayed out all night, and in less than 1 year, I was able to speak Japanese, yeah.
That's an interesting
just
point
for survival instinct, I guess.
You're talking about the nodding side of things. So one really interesting thing about Japanese communication is that there's a lot of affirmation for what the other person is saying. And so when you're speaking to someone, you're always responding to that person. And that also gives you a very strong sense of engagement, I think, when you're discussing things. And also it means that when we come to America or the UK, whenever people speak to us, we're going, yes, 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 and like nodding our heads all the time. And the other person's saying, why are they reacting like this?
I'm super interested in what you're saying.
And the other way, and the other thing that happens for us is like we come here, and we'll speak to someone, and we're like, why isn't this person responding at all to anything I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
They're just standing there looking at me
That's the
silently.
same reaction I got, like, are you interested in what I'm saying? Or
exactly, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of interesting differences like that, I think, cultural differences.
Noriko, what do you have like kind of a unique thing coming from China to Japan to the UK?
Well, because I mainly grew up in the Asian area, I didn't notice those things till you guys mentioned it. And this is something happening in Japan. A lot of developers, like more developers from outside Japan are coming, and then they are kind of telling us what our culture is, and it's very interesting. I just want to echo what Massimo said earlier about the creative approach. So when I first started working in Japan studio, I went to very traditional studios, developers, and like he said, it was very, programmers just do programming, and artists just do art, and then only the game designers and directors design the game, and all the roles are very clear and separate. And I thought it was normal, and I thought it was going to be like this always. But after a while, I joined a research team within Japan Studio. In the research team, we were developing technical demos for PlayStation 4. And how it worked was we only had like 2-3 programmers and myself and the director. And we created demos every week, different demos every week. And the director said, Noriko, everyone has to be a creator. We don't need designers at this point yet, because programmers are supposed to be designer as well, and I have to be a designer as well. So I started. It was like a wake-up call for me, and I started, giving the ideas, drawing the design sheet, and I think that's why at the moment a lot of small teams, independent teams, they're becoming very successful in Japan because they have different approach to the creative process.
Talking of that, I'm wearing a Bit Summit t-shirt. This is an indie event we hold in Kyoto. So if you're ever over in Kyoto, we don't know when the date is for the next one yet. We're still arranging the details for the next one, but we have this big indie event, and it's a very international kind of affair.
Yeah.
And John's one of the main people who kind of really deals with all the hassle that goes with it.
So much fun. It's so worth it, though. Yeah, we had like 120 devs this year come out from all over the world. This is a little bit off topic, but you can really see the change in the Japanese industry through events like Bit Summit, where we have a lot of, I think the indie fever or fervor that has kind of gripped the world everywhere in the West has started to spread to Japan, and through outlets like digital downloads on PlayStation and Steam, you see a lot more games and lots like smaller teams making really interesting games. And they often need help from Western people and stuff like localization. So those are opportunities that you can look into.
It's definitely a way to get to Japan, isn't it? To sort of start feeling out that sort of indie side of things as well.
I think probably a lot of people here are curious. How many people here speak any Japanese?
Wow.
Oh, excellent. When I first came to Japan, I had 2 semesters of Japanese in college, and then I had like 2 years where I didn't speak Japanese at all, and then I came to Japan and kind of started to pick the language up slowly. I was lucky because my wife speaks Japanese. She's Japanese, and she speaks English also, so it kind of acclimated me to the language very quickly. Did you guys have any trouble making the switch, or Tsubasa, Noriko switching to between English and Japanese?
It's funny you bring that up, because I moved to Japan when I was 13. I grew up in, again, New York, New Jersey. I spoke the language because I was at home. My parents are Japanese. Reading and writing, that was a different story. So I mean, growing up as a kid in the suburbs of New York, New Jersey, I mean, the majority of my schoolmates were not Japanese. I maybe had 3 Japanese kids in my whole school. There's this thing called Japanese school for the Japanese communities that you send your kid to on Saturday morning. Saturday morning happens to be the game day for Little League. So my parents are forcing me to go to this thing. I'm like, I am not going because I'm gonna miss my game. I'm starting lineup. I'm batting 5th, playing right field. Hell no, I'm not gonna miss that game for this stupid Japanese school. I'm like, why? 13, moved back to Japan. Oh shit. Go to the train station, buy a ticket. Right. Where am I going? I can say it, so I go to the station master. Excuse me, sir, can I buy a ticket to so-and-so? I look Japanese. So he looks at me, he's like, son, what's wrong with you? Look at the sign, figure it out. I'm like, I can't read it. It was the most embarrassing time of my life. But because of that, I went to a Japanese school immediately, took a deep dive, sink or swim. It was rough. It was a rough 3 years. I got over it. Luckily, I think I'm very thankful for that experience now. At the time, life was miserable. No, trust me, it wasn't funny at the time. But yeah, and at school, like kids hate you because you're different. And kids at that age are brutal. Like, growing up, I'm sure you remember at least 1 or 2 episodes where you hated your school friends or whatever. But yeah, I mean, they have this thing called ijime, where like if you stand out, they either like completely like ignore you or whatever. I went through that, and I skipped school for like a year. But so be it. That gave me the time to adapt and catch up on the language, and here I am.
It must be really tough though, like to switch schools internationally like that. It must be. Yeah.
I think it's the age.
Yeah.
If it was still in grade
Puberty.
that too. If it was, I think if you move probably under the age of 10, you're good. But once you pass that threshold and then all the way up to your probably high school years, I think that bracket is probably the toughest for anybody to transition that drastic a gap of culture difference, language. Again, because I grew up in the States. Here you're taught to express yourself. If you go to class, you have a question, you raise your hand. That is expected, and that's the way of life. In Japan, the schools, if you have a question, you do not ask it in class. It is an unspoken rule.
Yeah, that makes for some really awkward classes sometimes.
But I mean, that's just one example of all these unspoken rules that the culture has. And but I mean, you get it eventually, but it's just you learn it the hard way.
I wanted to ask if you guys had like any, very, very quickly, because I want to open up the mic, like any kind of like really like do's and don'ts or something that happened to you like when you first started working in a Japanese company.
Never question the director. No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
You were the director.
That's why.
No,
I just meant it's like an unspoken rule again. I think at least it was an unspoken rule that during meetings or during explanations or vision holding moments, you don't really actually stick
You're
out
there to
and
listen.
say no, it's not going to be like that. But after that, you could actually go out and normally you go to an izakaya and you can talk whatever you want about the game. And I mean, it's just a matter again of probably etiquette than anything else.
Brett.
One thing I was going to say, and I mean, this is really common sense, and it's not just in Japanese game industry or whatever, but anywhere. But like, the one thing about Japan that is interesting, working in sort of a corporate role, is that Japan has a very old policy in industry to rotate people into different positions every 3 to 5 years. So what the idea in Japan is when they hire you out of college, they don't hire you for whatever you studied in college. They don't care about that at all because they're going to train you to do what they want you to do. And then they're going to put you in that position for 3 to 5 years, and then they're going to rotate you into a completely different job. So there's not an idea of like necessarily of a specialist in a particular role. They want you to be well-rounded in everything the company does so they can slot you in where they need people. But what this means is, and what I learned the hard way when I first started SCEJ, was that you can never be an asshole to people because you never know when they come to work with you. You know, like I had so many times when people would be like, hey, Brad, I need you to do this for me. And I'm like, I don't work for you. I don't even know who you are. I'm not gonna do that. And I just blow them off. And then 3 years later, they're sitting next to me and I'm like, oh, Jesus.
But
You know, and they're like, now it's on. And I'm like, oh, God, I'm sorry.
Remember that thing I asked you to do?
Yeah. 3 years ago.
I think on a positive side of things, that's also one of the reasons why Japanese teams are like tighter, I guess. You know, because everybody gets to know each other, and it's like every single team member shares the same, amount of responsibility or stress, let's say, or duties even with other team members. So it's less, ironically, it's less specific in a way.
I have there's one sort of important different way of thinking that I notice a lot, because we bring over a lot of foreigners, gaijin, to work at Q Games, and I can tell the ones almost now. I can tell the ones who are going to be staying in Japan and the ones who kind of bounce off the surface. And there's a very easy test for this, and it's if there is a sort of collection, like a kitty, for someone in the office. Maybe it's for maybe the secretary in the office. Maybe everyone wants to say thank you to her or something like that. And we go around and we collect this kitty. We do get a certain percentage of the foreign staff who will just say, "I'm not paying $5 into this kitty." And the point is that kitty isn't really an optional thing. It's and when you do that, when you say that, when you're expressing, it's normally it's not a huge amount of money. It's always like $3 or $5 or something like that. It only happens like once or twice a year. That really, when you hit that difference, I can pretty much tell that okay, this foreigner isn't going to stay in Japan because it's one of the cultural differences. Yeah. And it really comes about in, so Valentine's Day is a big thing in Japan. And with Valentine's Day, it's the other way around. So we have a white day. Yeah. So with Valentine's Day, the girls give to the boys, and we have this event called White Day, which is a month later, where boys give to the girls. But in the office, when we go around, the way to do it is that you send this kitty around. Everybody puts like $3 in or $5 in. But then sometimes we'll hit one of these people and they'll say, "No, I think I'm not going to do this. I'm going to buy things myself and bring them in." And what this does is it creates a huge break in the harmony of the office, because if everybody does that, so this is a very Japanese way of thinking, because if everybody does that, you're going to end up with this mountain of cookies, and all the girls in the office are going to get so fat, but from the individual point of view, obviously you go, well, I want to go and buy, this box of cookies and give it to all the girls in the office or whatever, but they're not, it's a different way of thinking, it's like, it's more of a harmonious
it's very important to be part of the group.
Yeah. And there's just one other very simple rule I want to say, is when you go out, so if you ever arrive in Japan, you're working in Japan, you just started, and you go out for drinks, when the beers come out, don't start drinking them until you've said kanpai. I see this all the time. So in Japan, there's this like unspoken rule that until the drinks have all come out and everybody's got their drinks, you don't start drinking. And so that's just a little funny little anecdotal one.
All right. We only have a little time left, but I want to open the floor to questions. If you guys want to know, pick our brains, go for it.
Hello? Is this on? It should be. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, so obviously in the West, PlayStation console has been doing some very good numbers. But over in Japan, of course, the 800-pound gorilla is the mobile game industry, and that how it's been growing so rapidly, it's become like a bubble, to say the least. But so how is it like trying to work in Japan when you're mostly working on like game consoles and handhelds and stuff like that, when you're dealing with trying to get talent, but they're more interested in the mobile games or like trying to compete with them? Do you guys feel that kind of pressure while working there?
Who wants to feel that one? That's a little landmine there.
I'm not. There aren't. Well, I mean, do you mean like iPhone mobile, or do you mean the Japanese style of
free to play, all that stuff?
Yeah, I mean,
he's talking about your Grees, your gung hos, your DNAs.
Yeah, so
yeah, gung hos, yes.
Yeah, they're two completely different worlds, really. I think you know, we don't bother them and they don't bother us, kind of thing. But I think that the people who are interested in doing those kind of mobile games, they are going to do those mobile games, and the people who are interested in doing sort of the more personal kind of games that we make are going to come and do those. So we don't really see, or at least I don't see in the applicants that we get, I don't see much of a problem there at all. Obviously, there's a lot of money in the mobile stuff, so some people are attracted to the money, and they'll go and take jobs, and a lot of Japanese people will join those companies. But I think, you know, it's all a cycle anyway, so, you know, right now mobile is like that, but then the people who kind of get bored of that in a few years, they're going to come back and they're going to start seeing the newer experiences on consoles, and then they'll start getting into that. So, you know, it's just it's the Medihari, you know, it's the up and down. So I think it's a good. I think it's fine. I mean, I just don't see any problems like that.
Thanks.
One thing I would like to say real quick is that of all of the developers that we talked about earlier, DNA, Mobage, Gung-Ho, my favorite Japanese developer. Second, of course, to
Of course.
that goes without saying. Because Gung-Ho is the only mostly mobile developer that actually comes from a console background. All those guys were console developers for a long time, and they're conscientious about their games. They really want to make quality games, whether it's on console or mobile, which is very different from some of the other mobile developers. Those guys, I have a mountain of respect for them. They're super cool, and they want to just make good games, which is what we want.
When you guys were speaking of the kind of the rigid nature of a lot of the different roles and things like that with authorial development, how does that apply to like the day-to-day of development? Is there a lot of documentation by the design team, and then everyone kind of does it in like a waterfall style, or do they even do agile development on the teams themselves, or does it kind of everything come on from on high and then they make that game and then they try to go back and like? What's that cycle of day-to-day design and development?
That was kind of, we tried to do some Scrum and Agile in Grasshopper at a certain point, but it was not the norm, I guess. I don't know, I think it boils down to black magic, probably. I don't know how it works properly, because it's like there is a communication flow. But that was probably one of the biggest issues, I guess, that I've noticed, at least when comparing the two different ways of making games and actually communicating ideas within a company. So again, I'm talking about a very precise reality, which was my experience. So that might not apply probably to all single Japanese studios. But I had quite some difficulty in understanding how this whole process would actually take place. So it was mostly about me running around desk, literally, and making sure that people were on the same page about every single module of the game, because on a funny note, we're talking about roles and programmers, but for example, on the game that I was directing, roles were so specific that, for example, it was a programmer that was in charge of a boss battle, and that guy got sick one day, and everything regarding that boss battle stopped. All of a sudden, we couldn't move forward because nobody else could ever take on his code and understand anything. So again, you see, when you have this sort of like specificity in every single department. It was my duty basically to just run continuously all day, 24/7 between desks and making sure that every single bit of communication or changes done in the design document or whatever got properly communicated to everybody.
Right. Okay.
So I have a very unique insight because I'm one of the few people who works within Nintendo in the early days. And in Nintendo, there was none of this rigid role kind of thing. I mean, obviously the programmers did programming and that kind of thing, but everybody was involved in every aspect of the game, design, art, everything. And I think that explains why, especially in Nintendo's sort of golden era at least, that they made so many good games. You obviously had the strong director at the top to kind of try and focus everything, but on the team, it was just like everybody was just being creative every single day, every single minute of the day. There's no design documentation like that at all. But what they do is they collect it. So what was interesting about Nintendo is that as the ideas are created, they would just collect them in these clear folders, and they would just collect these like handwritten sheets from the day's design and just slot them in. And then you'd end up with this like kind of design Bible, but it was created iteratively. So it wasn't created beforehand at all. For example, in Star Fox, it was not called Star Fox until like the last 2 months of the game.
Jeez, what are we going to do to get some of that online? Like, do those papers still exist?
Nintendo archives them all, so they're there somewhere. There was a few years back, Miyamoto did a special interview in Famitsu, the Famitsu magazine, where he released a few of those early things, not for Star Fox, but I think for Zelda, maybe. But he showed some of those sort of handwritten design documents. But I thought that was a very good sort of flowing process, and it meant that everybody could contribute, and it really does result in better games, I think.
So we're over time. I don't know if maybe the guys will let us run a little longer is that okay? Okay.
Okay, really quickly. I'm an indie developer currently from Mexico, and my question is, before, now games are really like global, mainstream, and with the casual games also with mobile, but before it used to be like a niche. And my question is, do you think that the way you guys apply and get a job in the industry in Japan, does it still apply today? The way things have changed? Like, do you think that maybe now it's more like difficult, you have to be more specialized, you have to know more marketing or whatever to be able to apply? Because for the stories that I hear, some of you didn't know any Japanese when you started, and maybe it was because it was a niche. Now that it's so global, maybe it's more competitive, do you think?
I know that from my experience, it's actually easier now, at least in SCJ, to get a job. When I started, I'm not 100% sure, but I think I was the only foreigner in SCJ at the time. And I know I was the only foreigner to be in third-party relations. I was the first foreigner in 15 years of the company to be in third-party relations. Because they were like, does he speak English? Does he speak Japanese? Where's he from? But now, there's a ton of foreigners in SCJ. They're all over the place. We just hired a new one, sitting right there in the front row. So yeah, I think because of what you're saying, because things have gotten more global now, SCJ and the Japanese developers as well have all realized they need foreigners, they need Westerners on their, on board, because they need to get that insight. They realize they don't have that knowledge that these people have, so they want those people, even if they don't speak Japanese.
But do you think the qualifications now are higher and it's more difficult? I mean, to be that kind of guy that they want to hire?
I think it's actually the reverse. I think it's lower. I think that because they need so many people that have those qualifications of sort of understanding, the basics of design, but also being able to sort of live in a foreign culture, but are from the West. I think that they're more willing to be flexible with what they're looking for in terms of, personnel and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it looks like we have to go. Please feel free to come up to any of the panelists and ask your remaining questions after the break. Thank you for coming, and thank you for your questions. Thank you to my panel. You guys did a great job.
PlayStation